At the age of 46, Joanna Simpson was battered to death with a claw hammer by her estranged husband and BA pilot Robert Brown. The brutal attack took place within earshot of their young children a week before their divorce was finalised. Her body was discovered 5 days later in a pre-dug grave in Windsor Great Park. But despite evidence of considerable planning, Brown was convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility and given a 26-year sentence in 2011. And now, 12 years on, he's eligible for automatic release without parole or any risk assessment whatsoever. This has prompted Joanna's friends and campaigners to ask the Justice Secretary to intervene, saying, if he's let out of prison, no woman will be safe. We are dealing with the devil. Joining me now is Farah Nazir, the Chief Executive of Women's Aid, and also barrister and feminist campaigner Charlotte Proudman. Let's talk to Farah first about this. I mean, this is something that I think for most people, Farah, is pretty difficult to understand. Somebody who, digs a grave in advance of a murder that he then is found guilty of, although found guilty of manslaughter, where does the diminished responsibility come in?
It's a good question. It's not one that I think that I can answer. It makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to the campaigners or indeed the family. Where you have a man who has repeatedly committed the offence of domestic abuse against his wife for many years, and then he chooses to murder her in a premeditated way and manages to escape a murder conviction and instead receive a manslaughter conviction, it's absolutely shocking. It shouldn't be allowed. And what it really speaks to is the low status of domestic abuse crimes within the context of the criminal justice system. They are simply not taken seriously enough, and they're not given the credibility and the importance that they deserve. And
Farah, given that during the course of the trial, Farah, when you say he had abused her, domestic abuse, constantly throughout the marriage, what sort of thing did we find out that he had been guilty of doing to his wife throughout the marriage?
So I think there had been a history of coercive control. Domestic abuse, manifests in a number of different ways. Control is always at the heart of it. Controlling a person's behaviour, who they see, where they go, whether or not they can, access money, education, how they behave, how they dress, all sorts of things. Now, when you have that context, that should be taken into account. However, in many, many cases, it's simply not taken seriously. Now, this could be a lack of training, a lack of understanding, the fact that it's a relatively recent crime in terms of coercive control with its own sentence attached to it. But the reality is it's the status of these crimes within the criminal justice system that really affects the quality of the criminal investigation to begin with, whether or not these partial defences, such as manslaughter instead of murder, are challenged effectively. And then, the paucity of the sentences given out when a man murders his partner.
Let me bring Charlotte Proudman into this. She's a barrister, feminist campaigner. Charlotte, thank you for joining us. Obviously, you can look at this with a legal eye and you can tell us whether there's any possibility whatsoever or any precedent for the Justice Secretary intervening in a case like this to say this person's sentence is over, 12 years, that's it, but actually we're not going to let him leave jail. He's got to stay in prison. Can that ever happen? Does it?
Well, I think, first of all, it's always difficult to pass comment on a case that's ongoing. I wouldn't want to prejudice it in any way. And I'm pleased that the Justice Secretary has spoken out about this. And of course, he is in charge, ultimately, of the justice system, the criminal justice system as well. And so you'd think that given his responsibility and his position of power, that he may be able to intervene and do something about either this case or potentially other cases in the future. But as you say, he was jailed, this is the perpetrator, Robert Brown, for a total of 26 years. He's due to be released on licence in November after serving 13 years because the lesser charge, so it was murder, now manslaughter, means he won't face a parole board. And, understandably, campaigners as well as her family, Joanna Simpson's family, have spoken out about this because it really does, I think, go to show that the domestic abuse and domestic homicides, which continue within our country of 2 to 3 women who are killed every week in this country. And then you look at the sentence that's imposed as a result of male violence against women and girls, and I'm afraid to say it's woeful. And those are the cases that get to court. There are very many, particularly coercive and controlling behaviour cases, that don't even make it into the criminal justice system or even the family justice system. And the details, just some of the details of this case, are particularly harrowing and show, as Farah said, a pattern of coercive and controlling behaviour. So it was said that Brown had threatened to kill Joanna with a 30-centimetre kitchen knife. She had to barricade herself into her bedroom for protection, that he was suspicious of her movements, that he believed, who knows what he did believe, but by being suspicious, he was controlling by way of installing a camera and a car tracking device so he could monitor her movements. And these are just some examples of the types of coercive and controlling behaviour that we see every day. And even in this case, looking at those isolated examples, they're particularly egregious on their own. For others, looking at them in isolation, you may not think they're abusive in and of themselves or on their own, but when you put them together, you start to see that this woman's life is controlled through intimidation and fear and oppression. And it's not just her, let's remember, she also had children who were indirectly or directly affected by this, who allegedly could hear her being murdered by their father. I mean, it wasn't just her life that was stolen, it had a profound impact, lifelong, for generations to come. And that's the reality of domestic homicides. And in my view, they should be treated with more gravity than perhaps other murders, because of the lifelong impact that it has, not just for the individual whose life is taken, but also for the family broader than that.
So you and Farah really are saying the same thing, which is for some reason, and we could try to fathom what it is, domestic abuse, so something usually inflicted by the husband on the wife. I know sometimes it goes the other way, but not very often, is somehow of a lower status when it comes to being considered in court. It doesn't merit the same kind of horror, the same kind of reaction, or the same kind of sentence as a murder inflicted on a stranger by a stranger, or a gang murder, or a different kind of a murder. And Farah, I wonder whether, because of the career and because of what you do, you have thoughts on why that is. Why is it somehow lower in the pecking order? Why is it, as Charlotte says, you know, viewed less seriously than any other kind of murder or killing?
I think that's absolutely right, and Charlotte's right. I mean, I think it's very much a reflection of the tolerance that society has and has had historically for domestic abuse. You know, it's a family matter. It's something that you know is a private matter. You know, maybe she deserved it. Why doesn't she leave? All of these awful myths and all of these prejudices when it comes to the relationships and what is a good relationship and a fair and equal relationship between a man and a woman. A lot of that is still swirling around. A lot of this sort of toxic belief system is still swirling around, and that has found its way, as we've seen very recently, into the way that the police behave, into the way, and we can see the way the courts sentence. We can see where barristers are not challenging these partial defences strongly enough. You know, it's part of our culture, and it's really seeped into the criminal justice system. And you know, it's you know, it will take political will. It will take real desire to change that. That means resources, training, ensuring that we get fresh blood into the system, and ensuring that the experts on domestic abuse and those expert barristers, such as Charlotte, are the ones training the judges so they can actually recognise coercive control, recognise domestic abuse, because sometimes that's completely missing.
Well, I thank you both very much indeed for joining me on the show. I'm sure we're going to talk about this issue frequently in the forthcoming weeks.